All right, we're live. Yay. Okay, welcome back, everybody, for our Facebook Live. And today we have Johnson Chong, a native New Yorker currently living in Australia. So jealous. And he's the award-winning author of Sage Sapien, From Karma to Dharma. He's also a yoga teacher and a meditation teacher, a spiritual guide, and a coach who helps queer and marginalized professionals to feel trapped by their identity to rediscover more joy and fulfillment in their lives. His clients include Nike, Facebook, Lululemon, JP Morgan, Standard Chartered Bank, UBS, and many, many more. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Johnson.
Thanks so much for having me, Clover. It's cool that
Oh,
you're all the way in Canada and I'm
I
here in
know.
Australia and we can connect in this way.
Yeah. No, it's interesting what the pandemic can bring you if we look at the bright side, right?
Yeah, I feel like I've been meeting so many people around the world, I think more so than if there weren't a pandemic, which is kind of strange,
No,
isn't
it's
it?
true. Same. Yeah, yeah. So I know you have quite the resume and your path has been very unconventional. So do you mind sharing your story, how you got here? I know it's a big question, but yeah, we'd love to know your
Sure,
story.
yeah. No, I'm happy to share. Actually, I have some exciting news about my story. I actually wrote my story in a book called Sage Sapien From Karma to Dharma.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
2 days ago, it reached #1 on Amazon
Oh,
for LGBTQ stories
oh,
and
amazing.
in that
Oh,
category, and which is pretty cool.
yes.
So it
Congratulations.
became,
Oh, that's
yeah,
so
it was like, oh,
exciting.
wow, awesome.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, I wrote this book about I mean, I'm a bit young to be writing a memoir, right? But it wasn't necessarily
Mm,
meant to be a memoir about, oh, this was my life, right? It wasn't that serious. It was meant to be more of a spiritual guidebook for
mm,
the younger generation, for people who have felt marginalized, who have felt like they don't quite belong, because me being
mhm.
Asian American and also gay, I had this whole issue with cultural identity, sexual
Yeah.
identity, emotional trauma
Mm,
over that. I had an upbringing that was physically, mentally, and verbally abusive, which I
wow.
didn't
Mm,
necessarily think of at the time when I was a child, because I just thought that all children got beat like that if they didn't behave. Right, my parents were quite physical with
yeah.
us.
Oh, yeah.
So it was really the story really is my way of moving into a deeper spiritual path to find more purpose, more meaning, more self-acceptance, more love in very
Mhm.
practical ways. Because for me,
Yeah.
spirituality, it has to be practical. It's not about living in a cave and retreating
Mm,
into nothingness, which is also,
mhm.
that's one way, but it's not practical for urban day people, especially in these
Yeah.
times. So that was the
Mhm.
the purpose of me writing that book. And I guess to share a little bit about, what made me so passionate about helping people to change and to coach them through various modalities was really my own wounds and my own
Yeah.
personal issues with society, with
Mhm.
my parents, with my culture,
Mm,
with
nice.
so two cultures, right? So there's Chinese culture
Yes.
and then there's
Yeah.
American culture,
American culture.
and also not quite fitting into gay culture, right? There was a moment of
Mm,
rejecting that, almost like, oh, this doesn't feel quite me.
mm,
And so I'd never really quite fit in. It's like, oh, you're not Asian enough,
yeah.
you're not
Mhm.
gay enough, you're not whatever it is, right? Oh, you're weird, you're
Mm,
spiritual, what
yeah.
is that? um so
Yeah.
so this question of
Yeah.
identity has always been fascinating to me,
Mhm.
and how we
Mm,
as people get trapped by the limiting stories, the labels of what we
mhm,
think
mhm.
we should be, instead of allowing ourselves to just naturally unfold and inviting all these different parts of ourselves into our experience.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you for sharing that. That is so inspirational because I think part of being an unconventional Asian is that we don't fit into any narrative, right? And when we have to kind of fit ourselves in a box according to societal expectations, then that's when suffering comes. So it's just so great that you're able to do that.
For sure, especially with Asian Americans, Asian Australians here as well, Asian
Yeah.
Canadians, British Asians.
Yeah.
Asians are all
Yeah.
over the world, right? And I think that, and what's really interesting is that our culture as a diaspora around the world
Mhm.
is still forming and it's evolving and it's quite
Yeah.
new, right? So, I can really only speak to the Asian American experience because I was born in America, and it's probably similar in other places around the
Mhm.
world.
Mhm.
But there feels like there's this sense of lost identity with Asians that we have to fit into either a larger minority group that's
Mhm.
been a little bit more prevalent in the mainstream, like Latino culture or African American culture or other
Yeah.
subcultures in America,
Mhm.
um, or fitting into homogenous white America,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
staying very much cliquey in sub Asian American culture, right? So people tend to gravitate to where they feel they belong. And I always felt a little bit like, ooh, I don't really want to box myself into one particular group. And I always kind of came in and out of different
Uh,
categories and places. And I think that when we are hurt and we don't
mhm.
deal with the hurt shadowy parts, our fear, our guilt, our shame,
Mhm.
all of these shadow emotions, right? Then we don't come fully into a well-rounded human experience where we're feeling
Mm.
we get really spiteful. We feel that we don't have enough. There's not enough to go around. So we have these what we call lack-based belief systems.
Mhm.
I went to school as an actor, right, as a professional actor,
Mm.
and I remember that this was in the 2000s, where I would go into an audition room, and in New York City. I grew up in New York City, and then I went to school in New York for acting conservatory at SUNY Purchase. And I remember when I would audition for TV pilots or commercials, and it was asking for a specific Asian role. I would go in and I would look around and be
Yeah.
like, "Oh my God, look there! This is the room full of the Asian people," and I would
Right.
get super competitive because I thought, "Oh my goodness, there's
Mm.
only one of us
That's
will be,
yeah.
they will only want one token Asian
Right.
into like the the
Right.
the commercial or the TV pilot or whatever it was. And so it
Mm.
really unconsciously instilled this belief that there's not enough to go around, right?
Yeah. Mhm. Mhm.
There's only so much of this that is going to be
Mm.
accepted. And then so you
Yeah.
start competing with other people, and then you start, of course, competing with yourself, and
Yeah.
all this negative self-doubt comes out. And then there's a lot of
Mhm.
self-hate for your own culture, for where you come from, and that was my
Mhm.
experience anyway,
Mhm.
that there can only be one.
Yeah.
Uh, so I mean, there was a lot of that I had to deal with. There was a lot of course, navigating the queer identity and what that meant for me,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
because the queer culture in America is very much governed or influenced by the white narrative, right? So
Mhm.
being
Mhm.
a queer person of color, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
It's a different experience. You don't have as
Mhm.
many role models in that sense, right? I mean, let
Right.
alone just hetero Asian role models. There weren't
Mhm.
that many. So really, it was like the playwrights that I gravitated towards, like Asian American
Mm.
playwrights, and um, just yeah, art. Like art was my way to express, and then it was meditation later on that really deepened
Mm.
me into going beyond the labels to just accept things as they are. And now,
Yeah.
when people ask me, what do I identify with? Him, her,
Yeah.
they,
Yeah. Yeah.
like to me, it's like when you go into the spiritual path, it's almost like the labels. It becomes a
Disappear.
game. They disappear, but they're
Mm.
there. So when you choose a label, it's a choice, and it's not so serious. Right?
Mm.
It's a game. It's
Mm.
because there's a principle in the yogic philosophy in
Yeah.
Sanskrit called lila. Right?
Okay.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Okay. Someone just mentioned. I totally blanked. How you mentioned that. So there's this. Uh, there's this choice of, okay, this is how I'm going to show up and play. This is the stand I'm going to take, and that we're all characters playing this cosmic play, this Leela,
Mm.
and we don't become so attached to the labels of what people call us, and
Yeah.
we become really righteous and dogmatic about it, which I feel
Mhm.
sometimes happens in marginalized communities. We
Mhm.
tend to wear our labels as this like badge, or like, oh, this is who I am and I'm really proud of it, which is
Mm.
fantastic, right? We need that. And then
Yeah.
we also need to be able to let it go so it
I
doesn't
love
consume
that.
us,
Oh, I
right?
love that. Yeah, and Howie says we need to discover and create our identity before somebody else tries to define it for us.
For sure. And I would, say, and then even to take that further, after we define our identity, we have to be
Mhm.
okay with letting our identity dissolve. Right, because
Mm,
it's the I
detachment.
am something. I am a son. I'm a queer person. I'm an Asian person. I'm a
Mm,
hurt person. I'm a person who doesn't feel lovable. Whatever those labels are, right? It doesn't
yeah.
necessarily have to be like I'm a banker, right? That's something very tangible. And then there's all these
Mhm.
other adjectives we attach to the end of it. That creates
Mm,
suffering. What if
yeah,
it's just I am,
yeah,
right? And this is a very, Buddhist
yeah,
principle, which is just
yeah.
I am, right? And
Mhm.
then it's, yeah,
Oh,
exactly. Like how it's saying,
I'm
I am
always
always evolving.
yeah.
It's that the labels change. And this was
Mm,
an experience that everyone needs to have on a visceral level. I hope and I feel that
mhm.
it's really important.
Yeah.
This is a spiritual process that happened to me about 10 years ago where I was in the
Okay.
river in the Ganga or
Okay.
the Ganges River in the
Yeah.
Himalayas in northern
Wow.
India. And I was
Mhm.
having this experience where I was praying to the river and talking to the river. And at that point in
Mm,
time, it was a little bit like, oh, what am I doing? I'm
yeah.
chatting to the river. Like, what's going to happen? It was an
Right.
assignment that was given to me by a spiritual teacher.
Mm,
And in that process, the river started communicating to me, but not in the
wow.
way that I thought. I thought it was going to be this like James Earl Jones voice, and boom, the river was going to be like talking to me, right? But no, I was given this assignment to pray and to communicate, and it started flooding my body with sensations. I had
Mm,
flashbacks of these memories of when my mother hurt me when I was a child, and then it kind of flashed back all the times that my mother was hurt. My parents were hurt
wow.
by China.
Mhm.
Were refugees trying to flee communism. They came from land-owning families, so there was
Yeah.
a lot of betrayal um, that they experienced that they never processed. So they kind of took it
Mhm.
out on us when we were growing up, and I didn't
Yeah.
quite understand that. And so I started seeing into her pain, into my father's pain, into my whole family pain.
Yeah.
Generations felt that in my body. And I was also seeing things well as having some matches to childhood. And then there was this release. There was this big old cry that lasted for a very long time, and it was messy and ugly, and
Mm,
it wasn't fair that there was so much pain in my blood. And then it also felt okay, and it was this whole mix of emotions where it was overwhelming,
mhm.
but I accepted it. And in giving into the really dark energies that
Yeah.
I kind of held and kept trapped in my body, I felt really empty. And then I literally felt that, the labels that we have, I'm not a son. I'm not, uh, I was a yoga teacher at the time. I'm not
Mm,
even a yoga teacher. I'm not an actor. I'm not a gay person. I'm not an Asian person. I'm not Chinese. I'm not a brother. I'm not, so I just felt
yeah.
I am not these things. I am not these things.
Right.
I am just this. I'm just this shell of breath, this
Yeah.
this soul moving around this world
Mhm.
collecting experiences. And because that energetic experience is hard to explain because it was something that I felt
Mhm.
was all those chords that I was so attached to those
Right.
labels, they just fell off. I felt so clear. And
Wow.
then I walked back to the ashram. I was a wet soppy mess, and
Yeah.
right. And then I got back to the ashram and I just felt so clear.
Mm.
Then it hit me like, wow, okay, this is what emptiness is.
Oh,
Now I
wow.
can fill myself up with whatever I choose. And that kind of goes
Oh.
back to what Howie Howie said about, discovering and creating our own identity. We
Yeah.
first need to empty out the perceptions of the kinds
Mm.
of identity that we think we are, because actually a lot of it's clouded by karma, which is something that I
Mhm.
talk about in my
Mhm.
book. And I look at karma as intergenerational stories, the unconscious,
Mhm. Mhm.
unresolved emotional traumatic experiences
Yeah.
that we don't look at and we sweep under the rug.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
karma, and it affects
Yeah.
our belief systems and the way that we function.
Mm.
And if we can just allow that to fall away, then we can create and design the kind of life and identities, or
Mm.
single identity,
That you
whatever
like.
you
Yeah.
want, right? Then we
Mm.
take the desire piece, right? Then we create from desire, from our heart's desire, not
Ah,
from mommy and daddy's desires, not from what
conditionings. Yeah.
society conditioning. Exactly. So
Amazing. Yeah, Johnson's video appears laggy a little bit for me as well, but I think it's better now.
sorry, we're thousands of miles away.
Yeah, I know, but that's okay. There were so much gems in there. I'm like, I don't want to stop you because it's like, I want to catch every word. But it was
I'm like
amazing.
one of those old-fashioned movies where the mouth is not synced up. Is that what's happening? Where the mouth is not
Yeah,
synced
a
up with
little
the
bit, a
words?
little bit.
Oh,
But
okay.
oh well,
Ooh, I'm
we just
sorry.
need to hear your voice. Well, it's okay. It's just a internet connection, maybe. But I love that because it's interesting. So it sounds like ego death, almost in a way. It's like you're kind of like one with the universe and feeling like you're no longer anything. Would you say that? Like the labels when they fall off. Would you say
I
that's
would
kind of the
say
experience?
that I would say that there is death. Death is part of the process, but
Yeah.
it's not the end point. That
Right.
ego death is this is the beginning, really,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
the ego cannot fully, just like nothing can be fully, nothing can fully go away, right? This is kind of physics
Right.
101. The energy
Mhm,
is always
mhm.
transformed. It
Yes.
goes, air becomes condensation, becomes a cloud, and then it's
Right,
rain,
right.
right?
Mhm,
Everything is
mhm.
constantly cyclical and it moves
Recycle.
like that.
Yeah.
And so when, let's say, our perception of identity shifts and changes,
Mhm.
it feels like a death. It feels like, oh, wait a minute, my ego has died, right? But
Yeah.
that's not necessarily the case. It's undergoing a
Mm,
transformation process of
right.
a total shift in perception. So it no longer
Mm,
perceives the world and reality the way that it once did. And
mm,
so in that process of quote unquote death, it's being recycled and reborn,
mm.
and now your perceptions will change. So if you, um, like for example, we'll go back to my example of those labels falling away. It
Right.
felt like a death because I was so empty,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden those voices in my head, it was like, oh, they're gone. It's just a singular, just whatever I
Very
perceived as
interesting.
Johnson was there,
Hmm.
and there wasn't like a circus in my head. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, cool, amazing. So then it does feel like they died,
Mhm.
but they didn't die. They were always it's like waves in the ocean. It's like if you look at the
Okay.
ocean, the waves were like this at one point. They were very
Right.
enormous and
Yeah.
frenetic, chaotic in the
Mhm.
earlier part of my life. And then
Mhm.
the quote unquote ego death that you're referring to, it just was a calming of those waves. Those waves didn't die.
Mm.
They just kind of changed. They went down,
I
or the wind
see.
got calmer, and now we're in the calm, right? and
Mhm,
and and
mhm.
then again, of course there are still fluctuations. I mean, of course it's not like my ego is completely disappeared, because I
No, you
need,
still need it to survive. Yeah.
and that's the thing that sometimes people get confused in the spiritual path is, oh, I
Mhm.
need to destroy my ego. No, because the ego is a part of
Mm.
you. Your ego
Right.
pays your rent. Your ego allows you to promote the book that you have,
Mhm.
so that you like, it allows you to feel pride. All
Mhm.
these things that, like in fundamental traditions, like uh, in the Abrahamic religions like Christianity, Islam,
Mhm.
in Judaism, right? There are a lot of these precepts that say,
Mhm.
you know, envy, hate, right? All these things, jealousy, fear, lust. These are sins, et cetera, right?
Mhm.
Whatever it is, like, don't do this instead. All these precepts. When we go into a do and a don't, not from a place of discernment, but from a place of, oh, I'm just going to blindly listen to a bunch of
Mhm.
rules,
Mhm.
right? And it's unconscious. That's when we get into the mess of where everyone is, where the world is today, where we
Yeah.
just blindly follow. But when we
Mhm.
go through the process of deconditioning and really get to know ourselves, empty ourselves out, and then decide from the do and don't, right? It's
Mhm.
like taking down, deconstructing the building, then build it back up again.
Yeah.
Then understanding where our ego is in relationship to that. That's
Mm.
more conscious. You have a renewed relationship with the ego versus trying to
Mm.
demonize it, right? We don't
Yeah,
want to have a puritanical relationship with ourself,
that's
because if
right.
we go, you shouldn't do this, and then you feel guilty and shameful about it.
Right.
right? It means something, you haven't quite looked at something fully yet. You have to kind of dive a little bit deeper.
mm.
Um, yeah.
That's great. So that's interesting. So would you say we need to accept every part of us, no matter what it is, the shadows, the egos, and that's when the energy that it has on you kind of dissolves?
Yeah, and then that's the thing, when you embrace, I mean, if you just look at a real life example, if you
Hmm.
look at a child throwing a temper tantrum,
Yeah.
right? And I threw temper tantrums a lot as a kid. My
Hmm.
parents would go straight to frustration and they would beat me. They
Right.
get the tongue to you, the
Yeah,
tongue to
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
It's just
The feather duster,
a
whatever.
feather duster, right? And they would beat the shit out of me, and then they would break it, and then I have to go back to the shop in Chinatown and get another one. Go pick
Wow.
one, 'cause, we're gonna break that too, and if that breaks, we'll get the broom, we'll get the belt, right? So,
Oh my
so,
goodness.
so it was like, all right, but the more you hit the kid, the more you cried, and the more
Yeah.
went
Hmm.
into
Hmm.
this emotional mess, right? And that
Yeah.
was my experience as a kid,
Yeah.
because
Hmm.
and I would keep the only way that I stopped crying was because I was exhausted. But it went on
Mm.
and on and on, and that's kind of
Yeah.
how I was programmed to learn, was through pain, until like I
Oh.
so exhausted that I shut up, and then I was quiet, and then my parents would be like, all right, great, he's calm now, right? That's one way, and that's kind of how most of humanity learns, is
Mhm.
through exhaustion. So
Mm.
exhausted, right? But the other way, if my parents had gone through all their, had processed a lot of their shadow emotions and the trauma that they experienced as refugees, if they did something else, let's say they
Yeah.
embraced compassion, tried to understand why I was throwing a
Mm.
temper tantrum, understand why I was upset, maybe, and a lot of it was I was trying to express myself, and it came out a little bit, crazy for them, and
Yeah.
they were working, right? So they were just trying to manage three kids, and I get it. I get why they were frustrated. So they didn't want to have time to put up with me as a child trying to express myself. So they were trying to shut it down. But if
Mhm.
we went the other way, it takes a lot more effort to
Yeah.
embrace, to have compassion, to negotiate with the kid,
Mhm. Mhm.
which unfortunately is not how most parents
No.
parent, because it's easier to just go, no, 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 listen to
Yeah.
me, I'm a parent,
Mhm. Right.
instead of trying to find a two-way street to communicate. And
Yeah.
because of that, right, that's why I am the way I am today, right? And but if we went into the other direction, into
Mhm.
conscious parenting, and embraced it, it probably would have
Mhm.
dissolved, right?
Yeah.
And in the same way, if we embrace the parts of ourselves that we loathe or hate, or
Mhm.
whatever it is, it might change. Right? We don't know
Yeah.
what will happen. I don't know really what will happen,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
everyone's different, but it will change. For
Yeah.
better or for worse, it will change.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, that's so good because we have to basically accept our own identity, other people's identity, and just honoring our human experience, whatever it is. And there will be so much more love and compassion and acceptance in the world. But I think the collective is changing. I think this pandemic has brought up a lot of things, and people are starting to question. So that's why your work is so important in the world right now to help people kind of like discover themselves. So what other ways can people start discovering who they are besides going to the Ganges River and have the river talk to you?
you don't have. I'm a very dramatic person. I went to school for theater, so some people learn through dramatic,
Well, me
ways. Like I
too.
need
I like that.
dramatic
I love it.
experiences. It's like very cinematic, movie like. So you
Yeah.
don't need. You can have that experience in the supermarket, right? We all
Mm,
awakening. A spiritual awakening is not. It's not a. It's not like this one event.
right.
It is a culmination of many occurrences in your life that
Mm,
shift your perspective.
yeah.
So some people have many, many mini ones, and some people have like a really massive one, and
Mm,
then subsequent smaller ones, or the gradients and the ranges in between really fluctuate depending on your karma, your life history, who
mm,
you are as a person, where you live in the world,
right.
your constitution as a person, right? There's
Mm,
all these different elements that compose us. Some people are more fiery, some are more watery, some are more emotional, some are more, I go straight
uh,
to anger. That's my default. When I get
mm,
frustrated, I go straight to like, oh yeah, no, I don't like this.
right.
So I mean, we all have different types of wiring that we have to work with. And what people can really do is, first they have to take care of their bodies, right? Because
Mm,
if you're not taking care of your physical vessel or your
mhm,
vehicle, right? It's like a car. If you're putting the wrong fuel into the engine, you're not going to have you're not driving down the highway fast. You're going to be
No.
sputtering, and all this crap builds up in the, I don't know how cars work, whatever, the engine, like
Yeah.
all messed up. Okay. Right. So we want to make sure that we're taking care of and there's, many people and holistic nutritionists that have different ideas about how you do that. People have to figure out what works for them. It has to be a
Yeah.
conscious decision, whatever people choose,
Mhm.
because there's so many different types of diets and
Yeah.
fads out there, right? So there's that first, and then that's physical, right? And then for sure, yoga is super popular around the world. A lot of people are doing it just for physical reasons, but that's not wrong, and it's great actually, because it starts to activate certain types of energetic processes in the body, because that's what the shapes do. Yoga for me was my gateway drug, if you will, into the other spiritual aspects of what I practice now with shamanism and all somatic body work as well. And when we go into a yogic unraveling process, we start to understand that our body stores experiences and memories,
Yeah.
trauma, joy, all of it, everything in between. And
Yeah.
when we can tune into how our body is either holding onto those patterns or releasing it different ways, we become more conscious. So that starts to elevate our mind. So then the body and the mind are having this, they're just growing together, body, mind, body, mind, body, mind. And when you elevate the body mind awareness, your consciousness starts to expand. You start to see things in a new way. Then things will start to naturally unfold. You start to see things like signs. And this is kind of where it gets a little woo-woo for people, because you can't explain to someone an experience that you personally have had, because they have not had that experience.
Right.
So you can only give them a bunch of techniques if they want to explore to prepare their organism to then perhaps go into that experience in their own unique way. So I've for sure had lots of mystical experiences that people be like, "Oh, really? Did that really happen to you?" It's like,
Wow.
I can't make you, see what I saw or believe what I believe, because that happened to me. It didn't happen to you. And people that have similar experiences, they resonate because they go, "Oh, wow, I had something similar happen to me." But you need the physical, the mental, the emotional, and then you dive into ceremony. So ceremony has to happen from a whole bodied place, from all those different levels.
Okay.
Whether it is you meeting with other people in a group, workshops. I love workshops and retreats, because I would run workshops and retreats, and that created a ceremonial togetherness because human beings have been sitting around the fire for 200,000 plus years. That's what we've been doing, telling stories around the fire, and it's like healing. So if you are in a community group, you get together with your community. Whether that's your yoga community, whether that's just you sitting together and having some sort of psychological process or unraveling deconditioning process together, whatever it is, and there's sharing where you're understanding what other people are going through, that's ceremonial. So we need all of these things happening with the willingness. How you get there, because there's so many physical practices. There's qigong, there's yoga, there's meditation. There's like,
It's so overwhelming. That's the thing.
there's so much,
Yeah.
right? I'm a dabbler. I love dabbling. I like to see,
Right.
what's in aisle 1? Oh, what's in aisle 10? Okay, let's see.
Yeah.
I'm a shopper. Some people are more like, nope, transcendental meditation. This is my path. This is what I'm doing. And I'm going to stay here for 50 years. Great. Fantastic. You need to figure out what
Your
kind of
style.
person you are, right? And that's really, I tend to attract people who are more dabblers, because I myself am that. Like attracts like.
Me too.
So that's kind of my style. I kind of pick from. I have a shopping cart. And I kind of pull little bits from Buddhism, from yoga, from shamanism, from Reiki, and from body work, and then it's like, this is my shopping cart. This is what
full of goodies. Yeah, I love that. And is that how you coach people? Like you kind of incorporate all these different techniques to guide the person?
Yes, yeah, I do. So some people are going to be. I lived in Singapore for 6 years, right? And so in Singapore, it tends to be a little bit more cerebral culturally. Everyone's really in the thinking mind, and it's
Yeah.
a very corporate, financy kind of
Right.
place,
Right.
anchored,
Yeah.
shipping, oil and gas, and all this stuff. And so I did less of the shamanic work there because
Mm,
I focus more on the psychological, but
right.
from a holistic way. Not it, it's think of more psycho-spiritual, so
Okay.
psychological mixed with some spiritual guidance to get
Mm,
people to self-initiate, to self-realize, wait a minute, why
mm,
am I making the choices that I'm making?
yeah.
And what do I actually want? Right.
Mm,
And an example would be women trying to save face from their
mm,
their
yeah.
mother and father
Mhm.
because they want to get divorced because truly in their heart they didn't want to be married with this person
Right.
anymore.
Mhm.
And I think queer rights and women's rights have always been very closely tied. And for some
Yeah.
reason, I work a lot with women there who are older women who are in their mid 40s who are
Mhm.
experiencing this difficulty in trying to reveal their
Mhm.
truth to their family. Um, and and so I worked in that way. I worked more with the mind because that's where
Mhm.
someone was.
Yeah.
Now I've been in Australia here, and I feel the energy is different. People are different
Mm,
culturally. It's people are exposed to different things. So I can
yeah.
work more ceremonially. I can work more with storytelling
Ah,
in in shamanism, kind of like what
mhm. What
Michelle
Michelle said.
is saying.
Yeah.
Shamanism is it's such a broad topic. Like yoga, I mean, there's so many
Mm,
different styles. What is yoga anyway, right? It's really
mhm.
just the
Mhm.
state of union. What is shamanism? I mean, shaman comes from that word that we find in Siberia from all the different tribes, and it really just means the way, very similar to the Tao, which is the way.
Mhm.
What is
Mhm.
the way? Like it's just so confusing.
Yeah.
The way. It's not like dogmatic, like this is the way that you must follow, but it's a way that is
Mhm.
truthful to you that incorporates the physical, mental, emotional, ceremonial,
Mm,
because the soul speaks in symbols. When dreams happen,
yeah.
right, that is a way that we can enter into a non-ordinary state of consciousness where
Yeah.
we start to see, let's say, for example, like I used to see um a lot of signs that would point me in certain directions, like, nope, don't go there, go here. Like when
Like
I
what?
started
Like
my,
what sign?
okay, one obvious one was when I started my yoga Pilates meditation studio in Singapore, and it
Mhm.
was 3 years into Singapore. I had been there for
Yeah.
6 years. By the third year, I was getting a bit antsy. I had met my
Okay.
partner. We had adopted a dog, but there was something in me that was not feeling quite fulfilled. I wasn't quite
Mm,
satisfied. So,
mm.
you go into meditation, you go into ceremony, around a fire, or you do something that
Yeah.
connects you to the natural elements. That's very much the
Mm,
shaman's way. You connect to
I
the
see.
fire, you connect to earth, you connect to water, you connect to air. And
Nature.
typically there's a circle around it, and you sit in a
Ah,
circle with other people or
oh,
by yourself,
interesting.
and you commune with spirits. How you do
Mm.
that is through your imagination, because we know through quantum
Oh,
science that your imagination creates your reality.
yeah.
And so if people
Mhm.
are very left brain,
That's
they
right.
can read a bunch of quantum science books about
Yep.
how that
Uh-huh.
happens. I don't
Yeah.
care how it happens. I can talk about how it happens, but
Right.
it's not really my
We
thing.
care
But
about the practical
I
part.
care
Yeah.
more about the experience of it.
Yeah.
And so you trust what you see, what you hear, and
Mhm.
that becomes a signpost as to go left, go right, go up, go down. And so here I am. I was in Peru at the time. I took a break. I went there for 3 weeks with my partner and with some friends for their 40th. And here we are. We're sitting with this healer woman in the circle, and we're in in my active imagination, I'm in the Buddha realms. I'm in the lotus realms. The Buddhas are here. There's a medicine Buddha, and I'm seeing all these Buddhas, lotuses everywhere. It's fantastic,
Hmm.
right? So here I
Hmm.
am in the circle. And I don't normally hear things when I'm in a non-ordinary state of consciousness. I mainly
Right.
see things and I feel things. And
Okay.
all of a sudden, there's this really loud voice that just is like, I'm like, whoa. And it's not the way that I'm hearing, the way you're speaking through my physical ears.
Mhm.
It was like a voice in my head. And whenever I hear a voice in my head that is different from the other types of voices in my head, the
Mhm.
negative
Mhm.
self-talk voices, it sounds different. It has a
Right.
different quality, a different tone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I had this experience in it, and then there was a whole download of certain images of the studio, what it looked like. It was this blue
Mhm.
white house with a bunch of plants, and then it was just like January 2017. You know, it was like a movie. I was like, what is going on? You know, so then I got a flash, like kind of like cartoon images of
Okay.
a
Wow.
timeline,
Yeah.
and I didn't know necessarily how the studio was going to happen, but all of
Mhm.
a sudden it was like, no, this is the direction you're going. You're not going to leave Singapore.
Interesting.
You're going to stay there. I didn't know for how long, but it
Yeah.
was a sign. So when I got back to Singapore, I started this process of, okay, this is the why. I
Mhm.
see it and I
Mhm.
felt it
Mhm.
and I heard it. And I
Yeah.
know, you know, that if I don't listen to signs from spirit, I normally get slapped in the face with something else that will push me there anyway. So I better listen. So I started filing for paperwork to get my own work visa, my own company formed, and all this stuff. Normally that process takes 4 to 6 months. I
Right.
got everything approved in 11 days. This was on November 11th of 2016. And then 11 days later, so on November 11th, then 11 days
Uh-huh.
later after that was November 22nd. So, and
Oh,
if you know anything
wow.
about numerology,
Yeah.
11 is the number of the
11.
psychic, it's the number of the teacher, it's the intuitive healer. And
Mhm.
22 is the master builder, it's the cosmic architect. And
Ah,
so there were all these 11s and then the 22, 11 plus 11
22.
is 22. There's ones everywhere, there's twos everywhere. It's all this,
Yeah.
my goodness, what's happening? And everything just happened in those 22 days. And
Mm,
then I had to get, you know, thousands of dollars to get equipment to, you know, sign
right.
agreements and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That all happened very, very
Very
quickly
quickly.
because spirit was like, I'm here to support. And so
Mm,
the shamanic way is working with spirit. It's not
yeah.
working with, you do work with ego. The ego kind of actions what spirit informs you to
Mhm.
create, but you don't action things out into the world solely from your ego. And that's where
Right.
most people are operating from. I'm going to
Yeah.
make shitload of money and open a
Mhm.
business because that's
Mhm.
what I want.
Right.
I. Whereas
Mhm.
this was at the time where it's like, oh, wait a minute, spirit wants this for me to create for the community. I didn't want to open a
Mm.
studio. I had run a studio in New York
Oh,
City for like I
ah.
really did. A lot of people were surprised when they're like, oh, why did you do that? I ran a studio in New York City and it was very stressful. You know,
Yeah.
I was the general manager of the studio and I know what it entails, the business of
Mhm.
it. Like it's
Mhm.
a lot
Mhm.
of work. And so I was severely questioning, like, whoa, what do
Yeah.
you want me to do?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
not what I want, right? But
Mhm.
I had to somehow, my human experience had to negotiate with spirit. Okay, spirit wants me to create some sort of community here to do this kind
Yeah.
of work.
Yeah.
And then me, you know,
Mhm.
as
Mhm.
Johnson had this previous experience in the past where I
Right.
didn't have
Right.
the easiest experience running a
Yeah.
studio.
Yeah.
I had to make it work. I had to find this like in between. Like, okay, let's create the
Mm.
studio in a different way. So and it worked, you know, and I had the studio for
Right.
3 years, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden spirit showed me another sign. It was like, you gotta
Hmm.
go.
Wow.
I I had just re-signed my lease for 3 years, you know, in Singapore. This was last year, 2019.
Right.
And I had 3 months to get all my things, sell the business, everything, you know, and
It
get to it.
tells you a timeline as well? Like, does spirit tell you exactly or not really?
It's not really in time, but it's a feeling of urgency. So it's like, ooh,
Oh,
oh,
I
okay,
see.
go now. And actually, and
Oh,
then if I wanted like to anchor things into a timeline, I have an astrologer that I work with, and then he
okay.
can help to confirm. So
I see,
I'll
I
get an
see.
intuitive sense, and I'll go, oh, wait a minute, it feels like fall time. Then I'll go see my astrologer. I'm like, okay, give me the practical. Tell me what the star charts are. He's like, actually, it's
Mm,
October, November, and that's kind of what happened, you know, because this
I
was
see, I see.
last year, April, May, that
Yeah.
May, June. It was May, June that it was
Mhm,
um,
mhm.
that my partner ended up getting a job transfer. So then all that happened, and
Yeah.
my logical ego mind goes, "Wait a minute, Johnson, you just signed a lease for 3 years. You
Yeah.
have a flourishing community here. It
Yeah.
makes no life
No
is
sense.
great and
Yeah.
beautiful. You're
Uh-huh.
running retreats in Southeast Asia. Life is fantastic. What are you doing?" But again, if I don't listen to spirit, spirit is gonna, you know,
Stop
slap
the
me in
end
the
of it.
face. So I was like, all right, let me listen. And actually, when we left, we got here and it was like bushfires. Everything was, you know, the whole is the like fires were 4 times larger than the fires in Brazil, right? I was like,
Wow.
oh my, and people were like, oh my God, why did you leave Singapore?
Yeah.
Um, and now you're in a country that's burning. And so I didn't quite understand what I was
Mhm,
doing in Australia.
mhm.
And then COVID happened.
Yeah.
And then I understood, wow, okay, I'm
Mm,
supposed to be here during this, because if I was in Singapore right now, my
yeah.
business would be probably failing. I'd be struggling because
Mm,
what COVID's done to small businesses around the
right.
world, right? And now I've kind of scaled back, and I'm just working on me as a solo practitioner again, not worrying about a physical space, rent,
Mm,
overhead,
mhm,
things.
mhm,
The Spirit's always got my back, and I know to trust Spirit even
mm.
if I can't see exactly what's
Yeah.
going on. I
Yeah.
listen. I'm like, all right, okay, I'm going. Get me out of here.
Wow.
So I mean, these are signs, and we
Yeah.
have to train ourselves to listen to what is actually a negative self-talk voice and
Mhm,
what
mhm.
actually is a sign from universe.
Mm,
So that's a little bit into to shamanism, and
yeah.
then doing shamanic work in a healing aspect, perspective. It's just helping people drop into their own version of that non-ordinary
Mhm,
state,
mhm,
own signs, to get their own visions, to do their own soul retrievals, to find out any past life information that they might need so that
mm.
they can resolve something in their present life. It could be emotional trauma, it could be childhood stuff, it could
Yeah.
be violence from another lifetime. Oftentimes it's
Mm,
around how people died from another
yeah.
lifetime that hasn't
That's
quite been
trapped in your
resolved.
body. Uh-huh.
Yep, it gets stuck in the body, and it's some sort
Yeah.
of chronic pain. So we
Yeah.
help to
Mhm.
elucidate what that is,
Mm,
and then we go through a whole process of letting that go, and that looks different for different people. We do
yeah.
different things with that, um, but everyone's unique in their own way. But
Right.
essentially, it's really just connecting with the elements, with spirit, with archetypal animals. So I work a lot
Yeah.
with the animals
Oh.
through spirit form, and because all the different directions have a archetypal animal that holds the energy of that space,
Oh,
and
wow. This is very
that's
complex.
it's it is and it isn't, but
Once you've navigated it, I guess it makes more sense. Yeah.
yeah.
How do you find out who you were in the past life?
So there's many different ways to do that. Some of it is through dreaming, learning to
Mm,
stay conscious in dream state,
yeah.
and
Like
some of it.
hypnosis?
Hypnosis is one way. I have not been, when early on, when I was looking for past life recall, hypnosis didn't work for me.
Okay. Okay.
Hypnosis works for some people it doesn't. For my energetic type, it doesn't, because
Oh,
if you know anything about human design, there's
yeah.
various
Oh,
types of
yeah.
energy
Mhm.
fields. My energy field is very hard to break into.
Oh,
It's
what
it's
is
like
your type?
it's like a Mission Impossible steel vault, with lots of laser beams.
Okay.
So for me to have someone else influence my field to then take
Yeah.
me into a state, it's not happening,
Oh, I
right? Because
see.
I'm like a fortress.
That's good to
I have
know.
to go in and do it myself. So a lot of
Oh,
my
interesting.
work, I worked with my spiritual teacher. He did some things with me, and I had to go back in my dream time and have certain experiences. Sometimes it would be in meditation, but it
Mhm,
always
mhm.
happened spontaneously when I least expected it.
Yep.
And
Mhm, mhm.
there was this willingness and this
Wow,
desire to want to see.
interesting.
And
Mhm.
now I don't really care. Like, I don't have that relationship with past life anymore, because
Mm,
we only want to see into our past lives because there's this, you either experience a lot of deja vu, or
okay.
in current life, where you go, oh my god, that person feels familiar, oh my goodness, this situation feels
Uh,
familiar, oh wow, this place feels really familiar, and
uh-huh.
you have big question marks about things, and you want to understand what the missing link is. And once you
Mm,
start to see into multiple versions of past lives, you realize
yeah.
that actually I've experienced, as a person, all of these different themes
Mhm.
of suffering, of pain, of joy, of love, um, that most people experience. And then you don't care anymore about what the past life experiences were, because you've
Mm,
let go of the past
yeah.
in that way. So when people are looking for past life occurrences, really it's to magnify how they're carrying that past life theme into this life.
Mm, and
So
it's blocking you in any way.
yeah, and it plays out in our relationships most of the time. So
Mm.
we first look at the past lives around, we look at the three main past lives. There's a
Okay.
past life where you did the most harm, you
Oh,
had the most influence and power, and you did the most harm. Right?
okay.
So
Okay.
Just think about like the evil villain in a movie. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
you had like Lex Luthor, almost, right? And then you have the past life where you made amends
Mm,
with all of that. You know, let's
yeah,
say it's a future timeline, and your soul goes, "Oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I was
yeah.
Lex Luthor in this life. I need to redeem myself." So maybe you're a
Mhm,
monk or something hermetic or humanitarian in another lifetime,
mm,
or you've done the most with your power and influence and your wealth in one
yeah,
life. And then there's a lifetime, where you had certain gifts or
mhm,
special abilities, whether, you were a brilliant artist or whatever
right,
it was,
yeah, yeah,
beautiful dancer, you're the most expressive, the most loving, and maybe you either gained the most or you lost the most, or you
mm,
shared the most. Maybe you were a little bit anonymous, whatever it was.
yeah,
There's three main ones that you look at, and then there's
I
all
see.
these other ones that are, I don't want to say not as important, but
Mm,
they were along the way, because we want to look at the
yeah,
original ones and shift the relationship there,
yeah,
so that
mhm,
changes your relationship to it's called
mm,
your soul contract. Be-
yes.
If you shift that original contract,
Ah,
then the way you relate to your mother, your father,
will shift too.
your siblings, or the way you love people, it will shift. Like
Mm,
me, I used to be really angry at my parents. I was like,
mhm,
why?
I was gonna say, yeah, like,
Like,
with
why
the
do I have to go to
clear
Chinese school? Why do I have to
yeah,
speak Chinese? Why do I have to learn another language? Why do I have to go to school 6 days a week? I hate that, we don't celebrate Christmas, that we have to do like, you know, winter solstice instead of doing what other people do in America. We always did,
right.
like, my parents were very traditional. They did all the
Oh,
little
all the
festivals.
festivities.
They did all the minor, little holidays and all the
Yeah,
dinners and all the
yeah.
feasts. And I just always thought, like, oh my God, I'm so weird. Like, why do we have to be so weird as a family? And so, and I got angry about it. I was so angry. But
Mm.
as I went back into certain lifetimes, one lifetime was a Mongolian princess.
Oh,
And this happened in dream time. Now,
great.
just a little disclaimer about past lives. Whether you're someone who believes that actually historically happened
Mhm,
in
mhm.
1204, that you were actually a Mongolian princess running through the steppes of Mongolia, running away from your angry father who doesn't like the person you're eloping with because they're not of the same,
Tribe
level.
or yeah, yeah. Or
Uh,
hierarchy?
know, um, it doesn't necessarily mean that you historically had that event happen to you. It might have been. You could
Oh.
get obsessed and start looking for that, but that's not
Mm.
the point of doing past life recall.
Okay,
The point
interesting.
is, how does that story play out in
In your
you in this
current
life?
life. Ah,
You can look at past lives as, some people look at it as, oh, this was a historical thing that actually happened to me. Some
yeah.
people look at it more as, this is a type of story that has many different themes. So if you look at the
Mm.
Mongolian Princess Eloper story within
Yeah.
me, and then into certain uh, types of resonances I had with, like Snow White. As a kid, whenever I heard these stories, the
Ah,
Cinderella stories, the Rapunzel, right, all of
yeah.
these damsels in distress, and then
Uh-huh.
also the evil queen
Mm.
who seduces or tricks
Yeah,
the
yeah.
prince. I always felt very connected to that evil queen
Hmm.
energy. It just felt very real to me ever since I was a kid. Like, oh wow, it feels
Interesting.
familiar. Oh, I get it. And I always resonated
Yeah.
with that character. And
Interesting.
resonate with stories and how they play out.
Mm.
Certain fairy tales, they trigger something in us. So
Huh.
it's not about if I was a Snow White somebody back
Yeah.
in the day, right? It's more like, oh, why am I
Why?
resonating so much with the evil queen?
Mm.
How do I shift that? Because I don't want to, be
No,
the person,
pretty yeah.
the apple that poisons you and kills you because I'm seeking vengeance. And that was a theme. I used to play out the vengeance story quite a bit with my
Oh,
sister. Ever since she was born, I was 4. She was like, she was about almost 4 years younger than me. I remember taking her
yeah.
to the window and about to throw her out the window.
Oh,
My mom had to take her away. There was this
oh my god.
thing as a
Yeah,
young
yeah,
kid,
yeah.
constantly hurting my sister. I didn't
Wow.
understand where that came from. For
Mhm,
me,
mhm.
was because in a past life she killed me. So I was seeking vengeance from a very young age.
Oh, good
And
thing. Oh,
right now, if you look that's more if you believe in that kind of stuff. But if you
right,
look
right,
at
right.
it more psychological, emotional, just present life experience,
Mhm.
you could say that because my parents were mentally, physically, verbally abusive to me,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
created a cycle of abuse that I then
Mhm.
transferred over to my sister in the way that I was a bigger
Yeah.
brother to her. To
Mhm,
her.
mhm,
It's
mhm.
a cycle of
Yeah.
victimization.
Mhm.
So it doesn't. I don't care what people believe in. I can
Right.
work with whoever people are, whether they're more
Yeah,
secular about their
yeah.
beliefs or if they're a little bit more magical about their beliefs. Because that's the way you view the world. You
Yeah,
can believe in Jesus. You don't
yeah.
have to believe in Jesus. You
Mhm.
could believe in various deities. It's about where you are and
Yeah.
how that story plays out and how do we shift it. And
Mm,
that's really all past life work is.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I hope.
it's nice to kind of like see it as the root memory and how you just kind of understanding it, being aware of it, and shifting the pattern and breaking it in
Yeah.
this current life.
Pattern. Exactly.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
pattern.
I love that because it's
And again,
playing out in subconscious, and we don't even know that we're doing that consciously in our
sure.
working everyday life, right?
Sure. Yeah, exactly. And it's a different style for a different person. You know,
Mm,
I think people who are very vivid in their imagination and their dreams, they gravitate a little bit more to the spiritual work because they
yeah,
see things and perceive them as real.
yeah,
And if you perceive it as real, then it's real.
yeah. That's
So
true.
we need to work with that. Some people are a little bit more analytical, so they
Yeah.
don't see the world that way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Reality to them is a set of it's structures and forms and maybe numbers, and maybe they see the world like that.
Right.
That's real to them. But it's
Mm-hmm.
like looking at it's like let's say bees, they see ultraviolet radiation, right? We don't see
Yeah,
that. They see a
yeah,
spectrum
yeah.
of light that we don't have access to.
Right.
But it doesn't mean it's not there,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
So people are like that. People are
Yeah,
wired and they
100%.
gravitate towards different ways. Some people resonate more with
Mm,
psychoanalysis, so they just stay in the psychological. Some people have a broader range, a broader spectrum of life experiences, so they can go psychological, they can go
oh,
magical,
that's what I
mystical,
love.
right?
Yeah.
So different strokes for different folks, and I tend to work more with the folks who
Mm,
borderline more magical, right? Because they
yeah,
feel that
yeah, I
the
can see that.
structure
If they understand your language.
don't it's not the full picture, and they want to explore that spectrum
Mm,
of their experience. So
mm, yeah. No, that's amazing. Yeah, wow, this conversation is just like, oh, mind blowing. And I just want to kind of go back to the experience of like being your sexuality, because that
hey,
must be a really hard experience combining with being Asian with your parents and how you navigated that. Because I think that's like the biggest question for a lot of people trying to come out. And if their parents don't accept them, how do you deal with that? Things like that.
mm, yeah, for sure. It's challenging. It's really hard, and I can
Yeah.
only speak from my experience, and everyone will have to
Hmm.
decide for themselves how they want to either come out or not come out. That's not for me to say.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
thought that when I was in high school, I knew I was gay from a young age, and I
Hmm.
knew that when I would graduate high school, I would find a college that I would dorm in that was far enough away that my parents couldn't get to. I knew I wanted that independence
Right.
and that separation from them. So I did that. And I thought, okay, I'm going to live this separate private life where I get to express myself because I was quite sheltered as a kid.
Mm,
I wasn't allowed to do many things. Um,
right.
and I thought in a very specific way. I thought like, my parents always like drilled into my head, don't smoke, don't do drugs, because if you do, or even get a tattoo, you're going to be, associated with being in a gang, and your
Right.
life,
Right.
you turn into, you're going to OD on whatever, and you might die. 'Cause
Yeah.
I had
Right.
cousins in
Right.
Hong Kong that they had all these fear stories of, I had cousins that OD'd on drugs and stuff like that. And
Mm,
so I was brought up in a lot of fear, right? But I also had this thing within me that wanted to like, ooh, I want to explore what this is.
yeah.
So I thought I would never come out to them and I would just have two separate lives. But as I dived
Mm,
deeper into spiritual practices in my early
mhm.
20s, there was something in me that realized I I cannot have these two separate things. It doesn't
Mhm.
make sense. And I need to risk hurting my parents and even feeling a lot of pain and embarrassment and shame, because there was shame in coming out. I definitely
Mhm.
felt
Oh.
shame.
Mhm. Mhm.
I because I was brought up, sexually repressed.
Yeah.
I was in one of those families where if there's a kissing scene or a sex scene on the TV, you flip the channel, you didn't talk about
Oh,
it.
wow. Okay, okay. That repressed. Okay.
Or we were that repressed, right? No one talked to
Mm.
us about that. So I I wrote a letter to my parents. I dropped it because I wasn't brave enough to confront them in person. So I thought, okay, I'm going to write a
Oh,
letter.
well,
Took out
that's
the
great
Chinese
too.
dictionary, did my
Oh,
research.
wrote in Chinese. Oh.
I did. I had to do it.
Oh, that's so adorable.
I I put all my Sunday Chinese skills to test. Sat there for hours writing like a one-page letter.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, shit, so hard. And then this was before I went to India. I went to India for 3 months, and before I
Mm.
went to the airport, I dropped it in the mail, and then off I went. And then I forgot about it. Then a week later, I was in
Oh.
India. Oh shit! I wrote this letter to my parents. What are they going to think? Are they going to disown me? And I instantly regretted doing that, and then I called my mom and
Mm.
my dad. I knew I had to talk about it because this was there wasn't like they didn't have Skype. They didn't know how any of that stuff worked. So I had to call using a
Mhm.
phone card, and I called them. I called them back home, and they were using phone cards to call people back in Hong Kong and China. And so that was the way that so I knew that they had no way of accessing me in India. So I called them, and
Right.
I thought that um, they would disown me, and that was my deepest fear, that
Mm.
no longer be accepted in the family, and that's a very real fear that most people have.
Oh,
And actually,
absolutely,
what
yeah.
happened was, in their own weird way, they were first disappointed, of course, sad, second,
Mm.
then perversely caring. They're like, "Oh my goodness, we want to help you."
Oh.
They had the fix you mentality. You're sick.
Yes.
You're a phase.
Yeah.
Let's get you some psychological help. So psychological help, maybe some herbs might help you. My
Mm.
parents were really big into Chinese medicine. My dad used to work in Hong Kong. He worked in a herbalist shop, like a TCM shop.
Mhm.
So they thought maybe there was like a meridian chakra thing imbalance. So they were looking for like Chinese remedies. Like they really went like to some place that I didn't expect, and I was like, whoa, okay.
Right.
That's interesting. They wanted me to fly home immediately to get fixed from India. They're like, don't
Mhm.
just get a plane ticket. We'll pay for it. We'll just come home. You don't have to stay there for 3 months. And then they also thought that maybe someone had molested me as a kid. My mom, of course, blamed herself. There was this whole thing that happened.
Ah,
And
yeah.
then after they went through this grieving process and of feeling that they were responsible for my homosexuality, they
Mm.
they got angry because they realized like a year later, 2 years later, that I was still not wanting to, they were
Yeah.
trying to see it
Oh,
with girls. They thought that, oh, maybe if you
yeah.
just meet
Right.
the right person, right? My mom had this thing where she thought
Mhm.
that maybe if I saw enough images of babies, she could reprogram my mind. So every Chinese New Year, she got like these baby, like there's like these like calendars that have the different themes. She got these baby
Yeah.
calendars,
Yeah. Yeah.
and she would
Oh
just
my
put them
goodness.
everywhere around the house. And I just thought, what is this? And she told my sister, maybe it's like he needs to like see more babies and like want to have babies, and then he'll want to get married.
Oh my
Like,
goodness. Oh.
so she did all this stuff to try to make me straight. I was like, Mommy, no, no, no. It's like I'm still
Yeah.
gay. Um, and
Mhm.
and that was the hardest thing. The beginning was the hardest, and
Mm.
then it got even more difficult because we would get into all these
Wow.
arguments because anytime we got into a phone conversation or I went over for dinner,
Mhm.
it, this was my dad would get enraged. My dad was angry, of course, more than my mother. My mom was more, I want to say, she was trying to be a bit more diplomatic about it and
Yeah.
find arguments against my homosexuality. So she would say things like,
Mm.
oh, if they put a man on the moon and science is constantly evolving, I'm sure they could reverse this, right? She would she would
Okay, right.
like
Oh,
her she
goodness.
would find a logical
Yeah,
explanation.
yeah.
And then when I came out with my book, you know, I told them, you know, I was writing this
Mm.
book about my
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
homosexuality, my spirituality. They were like, no, you're not. Like, what do you mean you're going to put all our business out into a book? Because
Oh,
they don't want people to know. It's embarrassing.
right, 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 right.
Like,
And then
no,
how do you
like, we're
navigate
going to do
that?
it. So, well,
Wow.
I mean,
Oh,
that was really upsetting for them.
yeah,
And a lot of it was just allowing myself to feel really hurt by it. Of course, I mean, in an ideal world, mommy and daddy would be supporting their son, and I would feel loved and embraced and like I belong. But that's not my
but
world. Right?
no,
My
yeah,
audience is
no. In a lot of people's world. Yeah.
and I think that I needed to tell the story for other people who have experienced this or are experiencing this and really embrace my acceptance of their non-acceptance. And that
Yeah.
not all stories are, it's not this happily ever after fake Hollywood crap that we're taught to
Mhm.
believe in, right?
Mhm.
Some stories are
Mhm.
dysfunctional and
Yeah.
imperfect, and that's my story. So I have to love that story.
Yeah.
I laugh now instead of getting angry at my mom when she says something really ridiculous. Sometimes I'll write it
Yeah.
down. I can't believe she just said that,
Okay.
and it's comical. She came to Singapore last year and a half ago, on a mission to try and convert me, to take me to China for conversion therapy. And she sat in my yoga, Pilates, meditation studio as I had clients coming in. There are other teachers, you know, teaching as well. And she would, and in Singapore, you know, the older generation can speak all the different dialects. They can speak they can speak Mandarin, Cantonese,
Yeah.
Hokkien, and my mom only really speaks Cantonese, and it was the older folk that she would
Mhm.
start chatting with, and she would just break down into tears and talk about how ungrateful I am as a son, as
Oh.
you know, because there was all this. She was going through a grieving process of how
Mm.
I didn't turn out the way that she expected, even though I had this, you know, flourishing business and this studio and this community. She didn't see that as success. And I
Mm.
just thought, oh my God, my mom is an emotional mess sitting in my studio, you know, like just breaking down in front of all these people. And, you know, of course, I got a little bit mad. You know, I was like, you can't
Yeah.
do that. That's
In
not
front of your
okay
clients. Yeah.
in front of my clients. And then I understood. Then I mean, because I've done a lot of inner work, I went to a different place because I could either stay mad or I go,
Yeah.
all right, she is going through her own grieving process.
Yes. Yes.
Fine, let her do that. But then I had to like reframe it and take her, you know, to the back or give her something else to do during the day and respect that she had every right to feel the way that she felt in total
Yeah.
disagreement with me. And I think that's where we get lost when most people go through a coming out process, and let's say their parents don't agree or there's
Mhm.
conflict. We don't agree with
Yeah.
you, right?
Yeah.
We go
Yeah.
straight into this battle mode, and that is natural. We first go into like, no, this is me, that's
Mhm.
you, we don't agree, okay, conflict. So now the next stage from that would be you have to decide, you know, how much conflict you want. And part of,
Right.
yeah, and that took many years for me. I had to go,
Yeah.
okay, I can stay fighting with my parents, or I can diffuse
Yeah.
it by seeing how ridiculous it is and how comical it is,
Right.
and also allowing my parents to feel the grief of
Mm.
your second son is not going to carry on the family name because I don't want children.
Yeah. Right.
Your second son is not who you thought they were going to be. They don't
Mhm.
live near you. They're not going to take care of you. You're not going to see your second son
Mm.
as much as you would have liked. Right? They
Yeah.
had all of these disappointments, and I get it. Right?
Mm.
This is my truth. I have lived on 3 continents, and I've chosen to break away from the traditional household because that's generally what I want.
Yeah.
Right? And so, but that's not what they want. So we
Mhm.
have to be okay with our parents being disappointed. And
Yeah.
so now things are softer between us. It's not like perfect,
Mm.
but it's softer because I've
Mm.
given them space to, you know, throw their temper tantrums because
Mm.
they have every right to disagree and be that. And if we can just allow ourselves to occupy this space of conflict and disagreement,
Mm.
that's where healing begins.
Yeah.
So that was my coming out story. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. That is, again, so inspiring, because I'm sure a lot of people resonate with that, and they're navigating on how they can come to terms and be at peace with your parents or possibly your friends not accepting you for who you are. So I think that's amazing to see that there's this other side.
Yeah, better out than in, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah, in repressing yourself and not accepting
yeah,
yourself.
because if I used to think that keeping it bottled in and hiding it
Mhm,
it's safer, it's a safer option, but
mhm.
it didn't feel right. It was suffocating. And I used to get panic
Yeah.
attacks. I mean, I went to
Okay,
school for
right, right,
theater and
right.
I would get panic attacks because
Mm,
and the panic attacks stopped when I dealt with my sexuality and coming out to my
mhm,
parents because I wasn't like living two lives. I wasn't like, oh, this is my theater life and I'm open and expressive with my friends, and then
right.
this is my like family life. I was like hiding it. I was embarrassed about it.
Mhm,
I didn't even invite my parents to come to school performances and
right.
keep it separate, right?
Mm,
Because of that, I had a lot of anxiety and panic over it because I
mm,
could not accept my shadows. And yes,
yes.
it was really challenging to deal with that and to let those
Mhm,
worlds collide. And
yeah.
I now I you know, if friends meet my family and my parents, I'm less embarrassed about my brother and my sister, but I used to be more embarrassed about friends meeting my parents because I was like, oh my god, they're so
Mm.
embarrassing. Um, but my friends love meeting my parents because they're so kooky and strange and bizarre. They're just so different,
Yeah, it's yeah,
like the conventional parents, and
right.
I just think it's funny to watch them
It
do.
is, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, it's true. Once you like remove yourself from like the attachment of what they need you to be or expect you to be, then if you observe it like a movie, it's interesting.
I even
It's all fun to watch.
I started writing like a little play
Oh,
about this comedic meeting of my partner and my family, kind of like there's this play called August Osage County. If you don't know it, look it up.
no,
And
yeah,
Meryl
yeah.
Streep's in it, and there's a you can YouTube it, and there's also a stage version of it as well because it was a play. And anyway, it's very funny. It's about this dysfunctional, very white, like Southern family, right? And then so I started like the beginnings of this like my version of that, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
the Asian version of that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
but I mean, it's not complete. But what was really interesting in writing that, it really taught me to take light of the entire coming out
Yeah.
experience, and
Mhm, mhm.
then some of the things that I started writing, in it kind of came true. Like this meeting between my partner. I've been with my partner for
Mm,
over 7 years now.
long, 7
And
years, wow.
in a meeting of my partner and my
Mm.
funny thing, get this, my mother likes my partner, but for my sister. It's like, oh my god, it's like, my mom goes, "Oh, I love your partner. He'd be great if, like, he was with your sister." Um,
Oh my goodness.
you know, I mean, you can only I mean, it's just so funny if you think about
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just hilarious. Some people may not think it's funny, but I think it's funny.
But yeah, no, it is great. I love that. Yeah,
Um,
that's
but yeah,
amazing.
taking light of it. We just have to. Yeah, we have to take light of it because if
Yeah.
we're too serious about it,
Hey,
we get
life has so much ups and downs. Yeah, just gonna, have fun with it. Okay, one last question for you from Michelle. What do you see as the biggest spiritual problems, not the same as religion, for LGBT community, and what have you done in your spiritual work to help them?
I think one of the biggest issues is the energy of shame, which lives in the base chakras. It's
Mm,
shame. You can look at shame as a kind of self-rejection, and shame is toxic. It's not something that people think is worthwhile to talk about, but there is
mhm.
inherently a lot of shame in the LGBTQ community, and especially the people of color in the
Yeah.
LGBTQ
Mhm,
community,
mhm,
as you're dealing with multiple dimensions here. You're not only dealing with a sexual orientation thing, but you're also
mhm.
dealing with cultural differences as and also not fitting into the mainstream minority, which is
Yeah,
LGBTQ society. You're a minority within a minority community.
yeah. Mhm.
So there's a lot of shame around who we are as people. And and it's not, some of it is conscious, some of it isn't. And if we don't deal and engage with that energy, it sits and eats away at us, and we start to put on certain airs about
Mhm.
ourselves. You
Mhm.
know, I mean, especially in like gay culture,
Yeah.
people go and you know, they get buffed up, and this is great. You know, it's fantastic to work out and to
Yeah.
look great and to
Look
feel great
good.
and to eat
Mhm.
healthy. However, if you're getting buff and going to the gym and working out because you're insecure about
Yeah. Mhm.
how you walk into a room and you
Mhm.
want to peacock yourself out to the rest of the world, or the gay community, because you want to prove yourself to be
Mm.
that you're a certain way. You're trying to keep some sort of false image of, oh, this is what people like. So I'm people pleasing. Shame can lead to that,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Like, oh,
Mhm.
I'm gonna show myself in a certain light. Maybe you guys might like me, you know, and that's toxic over time.
Mhm.
That's not to say like, oh, just, you know, sit on the couch and eat potato chips and don't give
No.
a shit about what anyone thinks. I'm not saying that, but there needs to be a happy medium.
Mhm.
So a lot of the work that I do with people is helping them to realize that themselves, because I can
Yeah.
say it right now. We're having an intellectual conversation and it's
Conversation.
stimulating the mind, right? And
Right.
it's cognitive, right? However, we need to feel it
Yes, and integrate that.
and integrate it. And until you feel something and you feel the toxicity of it, and then you make the decision like, oh, wait a minute, I don't want that anymore, then you
Mhm.
have the willingness to not want it.
Yes.
The next stage is to then heal it. And after
Mhm.
you've healed it, you've emptied it out, you need to now fill it in with a new
Mm.
belief system, new values, a new way of operating. It's like, you
Mhm.
know, upgrading a computer system with new
Yeah.
software. That's kind
Yeah.
of what that's essentially all the work I do. Now, how I do that, again, it depends on different people. Some
Mhm.
people
Mhm.
I work more analytically with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some people I work more imaginatively with. Some people I do
Mhm.
more energetic work with because they respond more to
Mm.
that. And most of the time, I'm integrating all those different things, from yogic philosophy to some Buddhist principles to some coaching work. I do inner
Mm.
guidance, TM coaching, and then I integrate that with also shamanic work. So it's a whole melting pot of things, because different people need different things. And I
Yeah.
also work with where people are at, because now let's say
Right.
someone goes, no, I hate my mom. This happened to me
Mm.
recently. You know, I can't stand her and I hate. I was like, great, that's authentically where you are. Let's
Yeah.
work with that energy. I can't make you not hate your mom. If that's
No, that's
genuinely what
right.
you feel right now, then
Yeah.
I need to respect that and work with that. So it's also not about
Mm.
making someone evolve to a state that I perceive
Ah.
as like better
Better.
than
Yeah.
them, because it's
Yeah.
not about where I'm at and opposing where I am
Right.
to someone else's
Yes.
process. They're there in their process, and they actually probably need to feel a
Mm.
level of animosity to their parents, because that's
Mhm.
something
Mhm.
that's ringing true for them, and it speaks to something in their inner experience that needs to be revealed.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah, it's shame. Now, if we talk from a yogic perspective, the energy of shame in the lower two chakras is, so you have the color red and orange that lives down in your Muladhara and your
Okay.
Swatisthana chakra, which is your perineum and also your sacral. And
Okay.
if you think about the physical body, this
Mhm.
governs your hips. If you think
Okay.
about dancing,
Yeah.
right,
Uh-huh.
if
Uh-huh.
you ever look at anyone dancing
Uh-huh.
and they're really, let's say, shy to move their hips,
Uh-huh.
from a physical postural perspective, okay, if you just kind of close your eyes and visualize that, right?
Mhm.
And you visualize
I'm like
a
literally doing
school
that.
dance and a
Uh,
party. And I'm just gonna ask you to do it since I see you, right? I
okay,
want you
okay.
to imagine two scenarios.
Uh-huh.
There's one person who is in the school dance, and you're okay. Close your eyes.
Okay, okay.
Okay, you walked into like a high school prom situation, and
Uh-huh.
one person you see is dancing, but they're moving just their upper body very stick-like, and they're
Okay.
avoiding moving hips.
Yeah. So
Okay,
do
and
I
then you
do it?
see another person. No, no, just see it. Just see it. You can move if
Yeah.
you like. And then another person you see is very open and expressive, and they're circling their hips.
Mhm.
They're
Yeah.
they're let's say doing a very sensual expression of their dance, and they're
Mhm.
thrusting, they're arching their
Mhm.
back, sticking out their
Mhm.
butt, and they don't really care. There's
Mhm.
no,
Mhm.
right? So which of the two people do you feel has more of an issue with sensuality, with feeling comfortable in their skin? Person
Definitely
A or
the person A who's just moving their upper body is not as comfortable as with their sexuality, or
Right.
how they
Their
move their
hips.
body.
Okay, that was like a very simple, like visual exercise. I mean, common
Mm-hmm.
sense. See people's energetic expression of their soul's signature
Mm.
posture through how they walk into a room, through how they dance, through how they
Yeah.
express themselves. And because I've done a lot of somatic body work as a
Mm.
working with people's physical bodies, and also posturally through a lot of rehab work, as well
Mm.
as emotional somatic work. Soma
Yeah.
just means upper body. As soon as I look at a client come in, I look at how they
You
walk
can
into,
tell.
how they fill into the space. And so I look at that from a physical point of view. Then they start talking to
Mm.
me, right? Then they start
Mm-hmm.
sharing
Mm-hmm.
certain stories. And then I start to,
Yeah.
things start to
Pick
fit
up
into a
their
puzzle.
energy.
Okay, great.
Mm.
There seems to be an energy of shame there, and I can see that in their hips, and you can see deviation.
Mm.
The hips are either more stuck in the hip flexors or more, kind
Huh.
of locked in its pelvic tilting position. Are we able
Yeah.
to tilt the pelvis? Is it free or not?
Ah.
Are they? How do they sit in relationship to their pelvis? Right. So posturally, the
Wow.
first and second chakra, it changes how you occupy your physical space.
Mm-hmm.
Do you keep your legs really close together and
Mm.
afraid to open up into that space? I mean, so
Yeah.
many hints,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I want to get into that, but we know for
Yeah,
sure
that's
that
true.
you can see that if you were to walk into a room. That's how
Mm.
that shame energy affects you physically. Then there's a
Mm-hmm.
whole
Mm-hmm.
mental, emotional story that comes into play
On
as
top
well,
of that. Mm.
accompanies the physical, either chronic pain or physical expression of that. So
Mm.
this is what we need to work on, is working on
Yeah.
the base chakras, because if those issues aren't dealt with, a lot of people that feel shame, they have money issues, financial issues, because the first second chakra deals with
Oh.
security and finances. It's about abundance. You don't feel abundant because you don't
Ah.
feel safe. So
Right,
you and
right,
you
right,
don't feel safe because you feel there's not enough. So there's a hunger
right.
for more,
Lack
more, more.
mentality.
It's a lack mentality. Like me walking into that audition room, like, oh my God, there's like
Mm.
10 Asian people here, only one can
So
get
many
it.
Asian people, yeah, yeah.
And it turns into like Hunger Games all of a sudden for that one role, a freaking commercial, right? So then instead of like, oh, if I get it, great. If I don't get it, great, because there's more out there and it's probably more aligned with me if I get the other job anyway, right?
Mhm,
So
mhm, mhm, mhm.
abundance mentality can only happen if the first and second chakra and even the third chakra are energetically stabilized.
Mm.
That's from an energetic perspective. If you think about
Yeah.
posturally, someone walking into a room with a very anchored, grounded, confident, present posture,
Mhm,
they're going to have more confidence. They're going to exude more expressive creativity. They're going to be more appealing to someone
mhm.
who's interviewing them for a position, right?
Oh, for
That's
sure.
just common sense. So
Yeah.
all of these things, they interplay with each other, and
Mhm.
that's what we really need to. That's what I'm addressing. I'm
Mm.
not trying
Wow.
to change someone like just physically. I want to change the emotional root of how those stories of insecurity,
Mm.
of doubt, of self-sabotage, of shame, of self-loathing, all of that, how that plays out.
Yeah.
And then that will start to, and then we support it with some technical things, some
Mm.
movement, right? You
Oh,
support
okay,
that
the
with,
movement.
you gotta do all of it, you know?
Mm.
So it's kind of,
It's very
that was
comprehensive.
a long answer to, but that's kind of what I see. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Wow. No, beautiful. Thank you so much. With all that said, because like now I'm like, I still want to work with you. Where can people find you?
So I can be found on my website, which is my name, Johnson Chong, JohnsonChong.com. I'm also on Facebook as Johnson Chong. There's my personal Facebook page, and then there's Johnson Chong Coaching as
Mhm.
well, which is my like page. My Instagram seems to be deactivated right now. I don't know what
Oh,
happened.
oh, okay,
so
okay.
so whenever it comes back online, it's my name _ Sage Sapien, which is the name of my book,
Of your book.
Sage Sapien from Karma to Dharma. So if anyone would like to get a copy of that, feel free to get it on Amazon, leave a
Yeah,
review. That would be really helpful to help other people find it.
yeah,
And there's an ebook and paperback version there as well.
Yeah.
And I also have a podcast that I
Mm,
run. The last episode for this year is airing next week, and it's called
okay.
Truth, Wisdom, Freedom Conversations. And it is on Spotify. It's also on Apple
Mm,
Podcasts as well as
okay. Yeah.
Google Play. And it's a
Amazing.
fun podcast I started during COVID where I talked to various conscious leaders from many different, like yourself, in different
Oh,
fields.
yeah.
And we have chats about
Amazing.
resilience or spirituality. Very, very interesting people.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I can't wait to listen to that and just dive in all your content. There's a lot of information on your website too. So yeah, people
Yeah.
can go there and take a
There.
look.
And if people have any questions about anything, I'm happy to, you can reach me through email. I'm happy to respond. It's sage
Yeah.
at johnsonchong.com. And yeah, I'm also in the process of working on doing another 8-week journey. So I do these 8-week programs in groups.
Okay.
Really important
Oh,
for groups to get together.
okay.
I had been working more with women this previous
Mm-hmm.
year,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm focusing more on the queer community.
Mm.
So I'm doing that for next year. So if there's any
Oh,
out there who
yeah.
are listening, queer people of color, you
Mm.
can identify with any of the letters, and the LGBTQI
Mm-hmm.
plus.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I would love to hear from you and see how I can support you. And yeah. And of course, I
Amazing.
mean, you don't have to be queer to, reach out
Yeah,
to me.
yeah,
Like,
to work with you and yeah, chat with you,
you
of
can be
course.
not queer, too. So, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Johnson, for your time and for all your wisdom. Yeah,
It
thank you
was
so
lovely
much.
to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you again. And I'm sure our audience need almost like time to process all of that because it was just like, wow, it's so mind blowing that I need to go back to it and really, yeah. And Michelle's gonna follow
Thank
you.
you to the coffee. I was
There
like,
you
I'm gonna
go.
be a little bit late. I need my coffee. 1 minute late. It's like,
It's
please,
all great.
my coffee. But
Yeah,
I'm
of
good
course.
now. Thank you so much. This is a lot of
Thank
fun.
you. Thank you. Take care, guys. Bye now.
All right, bye.
Bye.